People already spend a lot of time on their phones. You're doing so right now. Maybe you remember spending hours scrolling on Vine, Facebook, or Twitch. While these sites are often very addicting, none of them hold a candle to TikTok. You've probably heard about TikTok in the news recently, with some of the highest offices in the American government spearheading initiatives to destroy its presence entirely, or at least force radical changes for the platform. With all the arguments in the Capitol centered on TikTok, one has to ask, is this really going to kill the platform, and what does it mean for the future? Will this be one of the smartest decisions we make for our youth, or is it a catalyst for much worse events to come? Platforms like this existed long before many of you were even born. Vine was the spiritual successor to TikTok. It started out as just a lighthearted app. Partners lip-sync songs together. Children making memes about their favorite characters. This was long before the days of Doja Cat or Sky Jackson. You see, TikTok wasn't always the massive titan you know it as today. In fact, it started out as 3 different apps. In 2016, a Chinese company by the name of ByteDance launched an app called A.me. Then later they changed it to Douyin, which rapidly accrued a huge following in mainland China. It was quickly overtaking the market share of other popular apps in the country, but this wasn't enough to satisfy shareholders and investors. Douyin had to keep growing, keep expanding, and keep accruing as much data as possible. Now, to many of you, this might be par for the course. After all, companies like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft have been caught in so many data scandals so frequently that we don't even notice it anymore. And while the consequences of companies sharing the details of your personal life with the US government are still in the making, this isn't the case with ByteDance. As a company based out of China, they are completely beholden to the will of the CCP and by extension people like Xi Jinping. This is problematic for a wild range of reasons. But before you even consider the consequences of this, you have to ask yourself, what exactly makes CCP members so willing to pour money into apps like that, especially if they're not turning a profit? What do they even get out of it? The Chinese government actually has a long history of seemingly dumping money into companies like this, and the reasons have less to do with you, the user, and more to do with geopolitics through you. Yes, you personally have a role in their plans. If you ever used apps like Weixin or Temu, you're more familiar with it than you realize. Their low prices are incredibly seductive and nearly impossible to compete with. But that's really the point. Even if these companies don't make a profit or are actively losing far more money than they make, they still offer the Chinese government something far more valuable than your money. They offer you directly your interest, your attention, and most importantly of all, your data, and reliance on these apps in your day-to-day life as well as that of your peers. That's not even an exaggeration. As of today, there's nearly 150 million users on the app. That's not in total, that's just from the USA alone. Almost half the population of the USA, meaning coin flip odds that if you are an American, the person next to you has the app installed on their phone right now. If you go by total number, around 20% of all internet users on the planet are using it. That type of influence is something governments can only dream of. So it made sense that the CCP would do everything in their power to make sure investments in Douyin brought fruits back across the world, starting with officially rebranding it to TikTok. The app started growing quickly, making smart use of a huge database of music, thanks to their smart acquisition of Musical.ly, and a powerful algorithm that could make YouTube red with envy. They had no problem keeping users attached to their screens, consuming highly curated streams of content. You're probably already seeing some of the issues coming up with an app that has such a large number of young people consuming content off of it. You don't even need to leave YouTube or actively look before bumping into some of the vile, disgusting content that is curated and actively promoted to or targeting children online. Sadly, this is just the tip of the iceberg. What's less noticeable is how apps can influence our opinions, our thoughts, and our mental health. Academics have been raising the alarm for years on how the usage of the app encourages neuroticism, damages children's attention spans, and encourages ideation exaggeration of a kind that I can't mention on a video like this. But this makes perfect sense when you look at it through a geopolitical lens. Just as the growth of the internet has led to cyberspace becoming a new domain of warfare, the same thing is happening to our brains. Every day, new articles pop up talking about the growing mind hazard in the digital space. These are real and can affect how we conduct law, culture, and politics. We don't even really know the true extent of how bad the effects are, but that ignorance is cause for more concern, as ironically it causes more mistrust and societal breakdowns. Just look at how much divisiveness and debate there was surrounding the potential level and effects of a Russian influence during the 2016 presidential election. But in the context of this video, it doesn't really matter if you believe Putin was able to massively influence our election in the past, because when it comes to the CCP's desires to manipulate and control other countries over the digital space, the evidence is damning. From Chinese military reports suggesting warfare is shifting to paralyzing and controlling the opponent's mind. A stark difference in the type of content users in China see as compared to their American counterparts, and to the massive collection of personal and even biometric information from American citizens all over the app. Is it any surprise that Washington is concerned with the influence TikTok has on its own citizens? After all, it's become increasingly obvious that these apps with no W are at the point where they can actively direct public thoughts and opinions if they weren't already. Granted, much of this concern does come from deeply questionable places. Just take a look at the primary companies championing these concerns to Washington: Twitter, now X, Media Apple, and Google, none of which have a stainless history when it comes to users' privacy. It has to be asked how much of this is motivated by the fact that TikTok is simply stepping into their turf and threatening their market share directly. While it's certainly an immediate concern, it does derail conversations away from the few lax rules that tech companies don't bother to follow, and how much they get away with even Meta supposedly paying a Republican firm to push messages about the dangers of TikTok, while actively participating in the same behavior it disavows so much. What this does is illuminate a light on the entire industry and the massive amount of power, influence, and sway these tech companies have over you and your loved ones. There's nothing corporations love more than a loyal customer base, except for a captive customer base instead. You may have noticed the fact that TikTok overwhelmingly directs its customers to shopping apps owned by companies with CCP affiliations. Temu, Shine, and others who take advantage of underpaying and exploiting their workers to drive profits down as low as possible. And while it might mean cheaper lobster sandals or quartz jewelry in the short term, the long-term reality of pushing people deeper into addictive purchasing habits that they otherwise wouldn't fall into are difficult for local businesses who have to follow at least some level of workers' rights. But considering that we're already accustomed to the same from Amazon, albeit to a lesser extent, it's no wonder that so many of us turned a blind eye to this type of behavior, even when we shouldn't, pushing us deeper into dependence on digital infrastructure meant to make us as dependent as possible. But if you want to see what the consequences of what happens when corporations are allowed to sink their claws deeply into all parts of society, you need look no further than South Korea. So clearly the app has a profound influence on people's mental health, but what about their political views? While a large and very active portion of TikTok's viewership are vulnerable and impressionable children, you might be tempted to even say that the consequences lie largely in the deep future, when these children grow up into adults, when they have the right to vote in elections and hold positions in office. After all, before the internet became ubiquitous in our lives for better or for worse, rapid political changes would take generations. This pace has been greatly accelerated due to the influence social media has on us as we grow up. But you don't even have to wait for the iPad generation to take office, because the effects have already manifested in a truly scary way in the present generation. TikTok is indeed known for its young fan base, but in actuality most people who use the app are already voting age adults. So if that's true, then the CCP doesn't really need to wait for your younger siblings, nephews, and nieces to come of voting age. They'll start with your peers. Or rather, they started a long time ago. It's to the point where many political consultants are even nervous to speak up about pressuring the company away from the potential CCP influence. But don't take my word for it. You only need to look at comments from the US Commerce Secretary, who speculated that blocking the app would cause Democrats to lose voters under the age of 35 forever. While comments like this are hyperbolic in nature, it shouldn't take away from the brutal reality of how just a small amount of influence in key demographics can swing elections one way or another. You can look at our current president as an example. Young voters were essential for Biden's victory in 2020, and the ban of TikTok could easily cost him a re-election. The same could be said for Trump, Biden, Yang, it doesn't really matter, because they all have to answer to the same voting base, which means that as of now, one way or another, they'll have to answer to the CCP. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. I have made a new playlist for my more serious videos, like this one, the BlackRock one, and the Downfall of Disney one. Unfortunately, my video on Hopeless Peaches has been pushed back, but hopefully I will be able to get it out on Tuesday. I wish I had more time to put a little bit more work into this video, but times are tough on me right now, so I have to upload one video per day on at least one of my channels. Anyways, let's get to the credits.